Today we're taking a look at a timepiece with a story that's just as interesting as its design. This is the Zenith Chronomaster Original, or as I like to call it, the watch that lost its star. Zenith is most well known for the El-Primero chronograph movement. So the story goes that Rolex needed a movement to upgrade their Daytona, which was still manual wind at that time. It's kind of strange considering their sister company Tudor had already released their big block chronograph in 1976, which had an automatic movement. I guess it took Rolex time to source the right automatic chronograph movement, which needed to be much slimmer, and hence they approached Zenith to make the movement. Now here's where the story gets interesting. Zenith thought that all the know-how of the El-Primero movement was lost in 1970, during the quartz crisis. When their factory shut down, I think there was an instruction to destroy all the movements or something. But like all great stories, legend has it that some watchmaker purposefully hid his Zenith El-Primero movement, including all the plans and the know-how, and even the sample movements I heard, dial samples, everything, and thus saving the company, which still operates today. So in the 1960s, Zenith launched three models, the A384, A385 and A386. So these three models were the first automatic chronograph movements. So the most popular was the A386, which had many reiterations throughout the years, but it was finally discontinued in 2020. It was their flagship model until the Chronomaster Sport that was launched in 2021. But today, we're not talking about the Rolex Daytona or the vintage models. We're talking about the Chronomaster Original, which is based on the Zenith A386 model from the 1960s, the very watch that inspired this one. The current generation watch is a faithful reproduction of that classic model, with an interesting quirk thrown in for good measure. And that is their 1/10 of a second movement, which is, pretty impressive. It's such a neat feature that is useful for most people's everyday lives, such as timing my drip coffee precisely and how long it takes for me to have a workout, like a run or a jog. And okay, fine, it's not practical at all. I mean, it's cool and all, but let's be honest, when was the last time you needed to time something down to a 10th of a second? Okay, fine, it just looks cool. No other chronograph in the market has a sweeping hand as fast as this watch. So let's run through how to read it, as it's kind of confusing with the 60 counter and all three subdials. So the left register is the current running seconds of the watch, which is for the time, the main time, and the seconds hand makes a full rotation in 10 seconds. And it's actually the elapsed time for the chronograph when you press the chronograph start button. And the right register shows the full seconds of the minute. So as you can see, it goes one whole sweep in 10 seconds, and that also means that it has little markers here that tell you where is the second, and that's where you can time the 1/10 of a second. And you tell the minutes by the right register, which shows you the full seconds of the minute. So it's supposed to run 60 seconds in a minute, right? So the chronograph seconds hand will run 6 times, 6 full circles to form a minute. And the bottom register shows the elapsed minutes that's being timed. Yeah, I know, chronograph shouldn't be this confusing, right? Or maybe I'm just not very bright. So here we have a case diameter of 38 millimeters, a case height of 13 millimeters, a lug-to-lug length of 46 millimeters, and the true lug-to-lug is actually 51 millimeters on the bracelet, and of course with a 19 millimeters lug width, which is very vintage size, which tapers down to about 16 millimeters at the clasp. The movement is the El-Primero caliber 3600, which is an automatic hacking movement with 36,000 VPH or 5 Hz movement. It has 60 hours power reserve and a water resistance of 50 meters. So the dial has all the right vintage vibes going. The reverse panda silver or black is new and not a reproduction. And you know what? I love it. I think it really fits the bill. The indices and the lume color is lovely. You know, that brownish for patina, if you call it. I have no issues with it because it matches the OEM strap perfectly. It's got all the right vibes. You get the small, almost non-existent bezel, raised crystal, you know, which is sapphire now, obviously. It lets the light into the dial. It creates this beautiful distortion when viewed on the side and certain angles, and is absolutely perfect in my opinion. Oh, and the date execution is fantastic in my opinion. The way it's designed and integrated into the dial, I think this is one of the best date executions on the watch face. Not just chronographs, in general, at this price point, it is one of the best. If you compare it to the IWC Mark 20, which yes, I know is not a chronograph, which I've spoken strongly against in the video, which until today has not corrected their date window. So before I continue with the video, let's talk about the sponsor of the video, which is 2secondswatch.com. So we have curated pre-owned watches, including this watch which is for sale and many others. And we also have watch straps for you to purchase, you know, leather watch straps that we feature here. You can find them on the website as well. Thank you very much. And let's go on with the video. Next, let's talk about how it wears on the wrist, because I think this is quite interesting to say. I have quite a flat wrist and I have a 6-inch wrist, in case you're wondering. It is a very small wrist and it claims to be a faithful reproduction of the A386 from 1960s, but I think the thickness is wrong. I mean, the watch is not thick. It has a display case back to accommodate this. So I think, I don't know, maybe the thickness goes to the bottom and makes the watch wear higher up the wrist, but it does give that kind of elevated presence. I have compared this to the A386 and it does seem to be very similar in the case design, where it gives a bit of an elevated presence, as you can see here, that lifts the whole case up. So maybe it's not meant to wear flat like other chronographs, and that is a unique characteristic of the Zenith A386, and so that means the original Chronomaster here as well. So what I find strange is no reviewers actually talk about this. I have no idea why. Initially, when I look at this float, I did find it kind of strange and I thought it was a bad design. But then as I kept trying it on and wearing it, I did find that for those who have sensitive skin like me, it doesn't cause any rash because the case lugs don't actually rub so much on the wrist, especially on humid weather or hot weather like where I'm from, you know, in Singapore and Malaysia. And yeah, in the end, I came to really enjoy it and like it. I think there's not much of a problem for it. It's just a very unique presence on the wrist. Just don't put it on the NATO strap. It looks strange, like the watch is trying to show off to other watches, if there's such a thing. It's just too high. Now, I'm a big fan of vintage details, and this watch has them in spades. The small bezel, raised crystal, stunning dial quality are all up there with the best. But there are a few issues with this watch that I have to bring up. First off, the chronograph. This watch is meant to be a modern, neo vintage timepiece, you know, with all this reverse panda dial and the lovely details. However, it seems that in trying to show off the 1/10 of a second feature, they've sacrificed some of the practicality of the watch. I mean, where's the hours counter? I understand it's missing in the Chronomaster Sport, where it's all about being flashy and innovative, because the Chronomaster Sport is the technical achievement piece of Zenith. But here, it feels out of place. I actually do use a chronograph. I use it mostly for very practical daddy duties, like timing how long my baby naps, and you know, as they grow older, they nap longer, right? Here, I actually think that the chrono should be used to time things that are longer than 60 minutes. It is more practical. I mean, if you just want to time 60 minutes, honestly, a dive bezel is more practical, and you don't need that kind of precision. And speaking of the chronograph, there's one aspect that's a bit of a letdown. So I have a couple of chronographs based on the Verju 7750 movement. In the minutes hands, they normally take 60 times in one full circle. But this watch, it behaves more like a mecha quartz movement. So it moves very little and it's very hard to read, especially in this kind of sub-dial where, you know, the bottom sub-dial register actually touches the right sub-dial and the left sub-dial. It's actually quite hard to tell which minute that you're at. I'm not sure if it's a limitation of the movement, but it's definitely a bit silly. I mean, if you can't easily read the chronograph when you're timing it, what's the point? Many times, I find myself squinting to try to tell the time elapsed, and that's bad for a chronograph. I think it wouldn't be as bad if it moves 60 ticks and you can see precisely where it is, since they're so close together and cramped anyway. It'll make it much easier to read the minutes. Oh, and I did notice a strange quirk of this watch. I've never heard any reviewer mention this before, and I'm not sure if it's unique to this movement. The chrono reset pushes, if not pushed all the way in, doesn't fully reset the minutes counter. So that's kind of funny. So if you don't press it all the way in, it doesn't fully reset the chrono. So let me know if you know more about this in the comments below. And there is the issue of the bracelet, or the Clasp in particular. It's not a good fit for this watch. It's hard to open, and it feels like a mismatch. It's a missed opportunity. At this price point, the Clasp is a real letdown. But what I personally feel is that this bracelet was designed not for this watch, but the Chronomaster Sport, because this doesn't have any vintage vibes. It's like they just slipped it on to this watch. I think this watch shines on the strap, which brings me to the Deployant class of the OEM strap. It's a bit finicky at first, but once you get used to it, it's actually quite nice. It's easy to use as well. On the bright side, the strap itself is very soft and will age well, I'm sure. It will form a very beautiful patina as well. It matches the watch perfectly. It's the same color as the lume of the indices, so no complaints there. My suggestion? Go with the strap option with the Deployant. It seems to match the watch much better. I think all in all, let's not forget why we buy watches in the first place. It's not just about nitpicking the things they don't get right. It's about how they make us feel. And this watch, despite its flaws, has a certain special quality to it. It's the watch with the movement that made the Rolex Daytona popular, and the very watch that was once the first automatic chronograph. Oh, wait, maybe one of the first automatic chronographs. So maybe we should just enjoy it for what it is. Appreciate the vintage details, embrace the quirks, and focus on how it makes us feel. Because at the end of the day, that's what truly matters. If you watched the end of this video, please remember to like and subscribe, because it will really encourage us to create more video content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. So if you're wondering why I named this video the Zenith Chronomaster Original, the watch that lost its star, if you look at the second hand of this watch, do you notice that it no longer carries the star at the second hand? Yep. It's not because it's just a vintage reissue thing. I think it's because the Chronomaster Sport now has that star at the bottom of the second hand, or part of the second hand, because now Zenith is trying to say that the Chronomaster Sport is the star of the collection.